AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What ALLEN and Ande Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.
Hello, AVAIYA family. Ande Anderson here, co-owner of AVAIYA University with my partner, ALLEN. Thank you so much for joining us for our Breaking Free from Toxic Relationships curriculum. We have another great class lined up for you today with Jodi Aman. She's going to be talking about how and when to stand up to gaslighting. Jodi and I dive into what gaslighting is and why people use it, how to respond to someone who's gaslighting, why it's often really difficult to get away from toxic people, and what emotional resilience is. And as we go into this class today, I want you to take a look at what emotional resilience might mean to you. What would it mean in your life to feel emotionally resilient? And Jodi's going to talk a lot about that as it relates to really trusting yourself. You're emotionally resilient when you trust yourself, when you trust your intuition, when you stop judging yourself and really put a halt to that really harsh inner critic inside all of us. So many people can relate to, I think everyone could relate to the harsh inner critic. So just stop judging yourself, be self-compassionate, really dive into what would it take to be compassionate with yourself. So just wanted to make a quick note of that as you start this class today. And also, since we're talking about gaslighting today, which is a common behavior in a lot of narcissistic relationship dynamics, if you haven't already seen AVAIYA's Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse curriculum, you can do that on the homepage of avaiya.com. Thanks so much, everybody, and enjoy the class. Welcome, AVAIYA family. Thank you so much for joining us for our Breaking Free from Toxic Relationships curriculum. I'm Ande Anderson. My partner, ALLEN, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of AVAIYA University. AVAIYA is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teacher, Jodi Aman, is here to talk with us today about how and when to stand up to gaslighting. As a psychotherapist for 24 years, Jodi helps individuals, couples, and families heal their past, expand emotional bandwidth, and create magic in their life. As a speaker and YouTuber, she guides audiences on building confidence and expanding consciousness in relationships, business, as well as life as a whole. And she's also a best-selling author and trains coaches and practitioners on how to activate their intuition. So welcome, Jodi. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Ande.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this really important topic as it relates to toxic relationships today. So why don't we get started with gaslighting? Tell us, first of all, I guess, what that is for people who aren't aware, and why is it that people use gaslighting?
Well, gaslighting is when you're standing up to somebody who's hurt you or who's not being nice, and they make you feel like you're overreacting or crazy or something's wrong with you. So when people feel that guilt, or people feel accused or blamed for something, they're putting it back onto you. So they're taking the focus off themselves. They're trying to distract you from what they did, all that kind of stuff. So that's all lumped in as gaslighting. And when you know what it is and you could see it, then it really changes a lot, because if somebody's doing that to you, the reason why gaslighting works is because it's very, very targeted and manipulative, and it sounds true. And so if you say, you make me really uncomfortable when you say that, and they go, you're overreacting about everything, you kind of second guess yourself. So you start to think, am I overreacting? Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. That's why it works.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it creates the second guessing.
Mm-hmm. And it turns it right back around on you, and you stop, trying to stand up for yourself. You stop trying to set limits because you start questioning yourself, and that's exactly what the gaslighter wants you to do. But it's interesting because it's not always conscious. A lot of times kids gaslight their parents. If their parents say no to something, they say, you're the worst mom ever. Or all the other parents let their kids do that. Mm-hmm. Those are other examples of gaslighting. And the reason why I'm pointing those out is because it's encultured. In this culture of stand up for yourself, we are encultured to, if somebody blames us for something, or if somebody doesn't let us feel our freedom, that we take them down. So when we feel powerless, we take somebody else down. And we're learning that in our culture.
Yes, very, very apparent, absolutely, in our culture today. So do you see this, like, I mean, when I think of gaslighting, for the most part, it makes me initially think of romantic partnerships, because there's so much talk about that in the world of relationships and psychology today. But what other areas do you see gaslighting in? Any other kind of relationships? You mentioned children.
Every other kind of relationship.
Got it.
Siblings will gaslight each other, even adult ones. At the workplace, co-workers will gaslight. People who feel powerless use that as a power tactic. So that's not true exactly, because sometimes we feel powerless and we try to, when we feel powerless in the world, we try to take control over something. And some people try to take control over themselves. So they'll have some anxiety, they'll berate themselves, they'll have negative self-judgment, they'll try to control a situation like eating or not exercising or whatever, or use substances. And some people, when they feel powerless, try to control other people. And so those people are usually where we label like the toxic people. We're talking about breaking away from toxic people. And toxic people are people who, when they feel powerless, they try to get power over other people or situations in a way that they don't really care, but the well-being of the other people are not as important as satisfying their need to have power back, their need to get that equilibrium of power back. And that's why most people abuse. Like, we think of abuse as an anger issue, like an anger management issue, but it's really an anxiety issue.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think it's always so important for us to understand, even if it's like people watching right now are like, someone is doing this to me or gaslighting me. I think it's really important to understand, right? Like, well, where is that coming from, and why are they doing it, and what's the reason, and all that kind of stuff. So I really appreciate you diving into that.
They do it because it works. It works too. I mean, they do it because they feel powerless and they want to try to take power back. So if they're accused of something, they try to get the power back, and it works so well. So they've used it in the past, or saw somebody do it, or saw it in a TV show or something, and then they tried it. And it's a bit instinctual as well. When you feel guilty, you just lash back, and it works. Yeah, because it definitely controls that other person. Gaslighting is so hard. That's why I wanted to speak about this topic, because it is so hard to stand up to. Actually.
So, yeah, like, how do you recommend people do stand up to it in a healthy, empowering way for them?
Yeah, this is really hard because it depends on how dangerous this person is. If you're a parent and your children gaslighting you, don't put up with that. You say, enough, you're gaslighting me. Like, I know you're feeling really bad. And then you want to you want to change the attention to me. I get what you're doing. So you could call them out on it. Once they have that awareness, they might not be able to do that anymore. Once it doesn't work, they stop doing it. So if your kid is using gaslighting with you innocently, it doesn't mean they're a bad kid. It's not conscious. They just are like trying to control a situation, just like a 2-year-old will have a temper tantrum to try to get their way. This is just a little bit natural, if you could see. But if you don't let it work, then they don't develop that as a behavior. So I hope that really helps. But once you have somebody in your life that has developed this over a long period of time and are really brutal, they can be really, really brutal about it. And then we think often when we're in this relationship with a toxic person like that, and they are brutal to us and all kinds of levels of that, we think that we're weak if we don't stand up. But we've learned that when you stand up, you get pushed down even further. And that's a difficult situation. And so is it safe to really be standing up? Or is it the safest thing to do is to pacify that person for the moment and make a plan to get away? Like, what's the safest route for you in order to get away from this person? And sometimes it's not to stand up. It just triggers them more and they make you feel worse, but you need your confidence to be able to leave. And so in a way, you want to pacify, like out trick them a little bit, not be a doormat. It's different when you're planning it on purpose, when you know that you're trying to settle that other person down for enough energy, for enough time for you to be able to leave and go get safety, then you're not being a doormat in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're just doing what's in your own best interest at the time. So, you mentioned it takes confidence to leave a situation like that. So do you have any thoughts on why it seems to be a lot of people have a hard time, a difficult time getting out of a relationship with someone who's toxic, or just exiting the premises if someone is toxic? Any thoughts there?
Yes, because it's conditioning over a long period of time. So this person who is gaslighting, or a toxic person, or a narcissist, or someone who's abusing, is an energy vampire. They've conditioned you in that relationship to feel sorry for them, to feel bad for them, to feel like it's all your fault. And so you're conditioned to feel sympathy, feel empathy for them, know that they don't really mean it, whatever you think. And you feel like if you love them and if you're just good, then they'll change. But when you just keep pacifying the gaslighting and the narcissism, they don't change. You're enabling them to continue to be the way they are. And so is it not a way? So, that's because we think that we hear that from gurus all the time. If you love somebody, you'll heal them. And so people in these toxic relationships often stay because they really feel bad for the person. And they know, if I just loved him enough, they could change. And also they've been so conditioned for so long to feel so bad about themselves and feel like nobody else would love them and feel like everyone else would notice this. Plus, they've been isolated from their friends and family for so long that they don't even have a community. When somebody comes to me in a toxic relationship, like really entwined in a romantic toxic relationship, and they can't get out, we don't even plan for them to leave until we plan and execute that they start to gather a community for themselves. People can't leave those relationships without a community. It is a million times harder.
Got it. Yeah, I can see why that would be so important to be setting up along the way if someone has a plan to leave. So
yeah.
So what about, I know you talk about in your work about empaths and the connection between a toxic person and an empathic person. Like, what's the effect that you would say a toxic person can have on an empathic person?
Well, if you have an energy vampire and somebody who has a lot of energy, but also is really sensitive to the field. So a person who's empathic could really feel what's going on in the field. So if they're around a person who's a toxic person, I mean, we're using that to lump together, but it's usually somebody who has a lot of misery in themselves. And if they have a lot of misery in themselves, it just overflows onto the people around them. That's how I like to see a toxic person. So they could be behaving in a lot of different ways, but usually their misery is so intense. Their self-hatred, their anxiety, their feelings of out of control are so intense that it kind of overflows onto the people around them. So that negativity is very high. So for an empath, they would feel that immediately, even being around the person, feel that. And they could either be like, I'm out of here, or they could, especially if they've been conditioned in other relationships to feel sorry for a person like that, they could begin to get into a relationship and feeling sorry and trying to save that person. But that person who's an energy vampire will keep getting so much out of them, and then they have nothing left to be able to leave. They don't have the strength, the confidence, anything. So sometimes that happens. It's not always, because you could be empathic and not get into situations like that, and you could get out of them eventually. But a lot of times it's what we see is that they're a bit more vulnerable. I think that the toxic person seeks somebody out who understands, who could have empathy for them, even though they're a jerk. Yeah. And maybe that's part of why they get targeted.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned conditioned responses a couple of times, right? So, you mentioned, if you've been in a relationship, you create these conditioned responses based on, you're kind of getting trained along the way to maybe feel bad or empathetic or whatever. How much of this do you think stems from childhood, like conditioning when you were children? I know you obviously do a lot of work in the world of children too. So any thoughts there on how that can influence our toxic relationships?
Yeah, our culture. So if you grew up in a culture that the man is the authority and you have to listen to them, or older people are the authority and everyone has to listen to them, even though they might not be doing something that's for the highest good of everyone. you could have that culture in your family or in the, your culture of where your country where you live, but you're conditioned to not really question that authority. Or if you've had a parent who has any substance problems, or if you have a parent who's a narcissist and has been really self-centered in your life, and you grow up trying to make sure they're okay. You grew up conditioned to make sure your mom was okay or something. And when you're growing up in that kind of way, it's like your family consumes you. We could see this. It's really interesting. A lot of times when people have had trauma and they don't heal their trauma, they need to consume. And it's not always other people. That's what the control, right? You feel out of control and you try to control. So sometimes they eat, sometimes they are addicted to, they get lost in, maybe they watch TV all the time. So it's a way of consuming, or they always have to be busy, or they always have to prove their worth by being over busy, or they're in these kind of relationships, they become that energy vampire. So there's a lot of different reasons why we're conditioned in this way.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate you going through that as it relates to, childhood, as well as, yes, whatever culture, society that we grew up in, because absolutely, there's so many things that I think we don't question just because that's how it's always been. That's what we were always taught. So
yeah. And if you have a parent who's a narcissist, you don't necessarily know it. You think that's normal.
Right.
And so quite often you grow up kind of thinking that's normal. And I really, that's the majority of my clients that I have. They've grown up in a family when one parent was just so self-centered, and they really spent a significant amount of time trying to take care of that parent or trying to satisfy that parent. And then it's hard because you're so conditioned to do that. You are a sensitive person because you had to read her, you had to figure that out. You had to see when things change so you could prevent something or protect yourself. So you really learn to read the world really well. And then, I have a friend who was in an abusive relationship, and they're exes now, and he's in another country, so he can't get her. And he asked her to advertise his new business for him. And she's like, I feel bad. I feel like I want to do it because I'm a kind person. I'm like, you're conditioned to do it, to feel bad for him. I mean, he conditioned you for 20 years to feel sorry for him. And now he's doing the same thing. But so it's really interesting to start to notice that.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you for sharing the personal story. And so what about emotional resiliency? I'd love it if you talk a little bit about that. So first of all, I guess, what is that? What is emotional resiliency, and how can our viewers achieve that in their life?
Yeah, so emotional resiliency usually comes when you feel like you trust yourself. So when you stop the negative self-judgments that we all do in this culture, we judge ourselves so harshly for everything. We don't really have a lot of self-compassion. And that really eats up our bandwidth. So when something happens and we feel a certain way, of course, we're human, we're going to respond with an appropriate feeling. But then we start to beat ourselves up. Like, I'm overreacting. We're gaslighting ourselves, actually.
Right, yeah.
Why am I overreacting? Why do I can't handle this? And everyone else could do this but me. And what's wrong with me? I'm weak. Right. So we have all this stuff that goes on top of that feeling. Then we start to really worry, like, how long am I going to feel this way? How am I going to ever live if I feel this way? So we have all these negative self-judgments, and then all these worries that really make it so huge instead of the original feeling. And if we had self-compassion, if we didn't go right to negative self-judgment, if we had some compassion for ourselves, we would have so much more bandwidth to then have that compassion for ourselves, take a step back, see the situation from a big picture view where we take it a lot less personally. To get out of the emotions of it, we could really understand all the players. We could see their misery and why they did what they did. And then from that position, you could decide what to do next. So that's emotional resiliency, is not getting caught in the chaos of the situation and the chaos of the negative self-judgment, so that you could then take a step back and decide what to do that's for your highest good and the highest good of everybody.
Got it. Thank you. I love that you mentioned, we can gaslight ourselves, because that is so true, right? Absolutely. I'm sure most people can like remember an experience like that where you're in your head like that, second guessing yourself and all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, when people hear me say that in my videos, they're like, how did you know what's in my head? I'm like, it's in everybody's head.
You're not unique. I know. Yeah, I love it. So, okay, I love it if you talk also about intuition. So I'm intrigued. So like, can you talk a little bit about, I guess, like the benefits of developing, harnessing one's intuition as it relates to toxic relationships?
Yeah, sure. So, we're all sensitive people. We're really sensitive, especially the people watching this program, really sensitive people. So we're empaths. That means we feel the feelings of the field. Maybe we're a little bit intuitive. We all had this. I think we got away from it as humans. We've gotten away from it because of all of our modern functions, our housing, our civilizations. We've gotten away with our connection with ourself and with nature. And so we all have this sensitivity, but now it's kind of hurting us because we're getting the negative effects of it, but we haven't learned from our grandmothers how to develop the intuition and the power from it and what it could do and how it can help us actually. So I'm trying to change that. For long years, I did a lot of videos about anxiety. I wrote books about anxiety to help people recover from anxiety. And a lot of those books are really about healing from trauma as well. So my books, You Want Anxiety Zero, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You. And I was really trying to think, what do people need when trust and anxiety are the opposites from each other, right? If anxiety means you don't trust yourself, you don't trust the world, it's a trust problem. And if you trusted, there would be no room for anxiety. And so what better way to really connect and trust yourself if you connect with your intuition? And I've been developing my intuition for the last 23 years with a mentor of mine that I've been apprenticing with her for 23 years and using my intuition in my psychotherapy practice with my clients. And so the last couple of years, I started to teach those skills because I really want somebody who is a clairsentient. That means they could feel other people's feelings, or empathic and they could feel. I really want to help them learn how to change the clairsentience to claircognizance. Claircognizance means clear knowing. That means you get information that you wouldn't ordinarily in the world. Like you just understand stuff, or you know things that you wouldn't ordinarily know. So the clairsentience, we feel stuff, so we could feel negativity, but that's not necessarily helpful. Sometimes it exhausts us so much, then we can't really do anything. We kind of close ourselves up in our house because we're so overwhelmed. But if we transfer that skill and that ability to claircognizance, so we get the information so we could do something with it and are empowered instead of disempowered by feeling all that. And so I've been starting to teach people how to transfer that sensitivity. And I think that's what we really need. Like right now, sensitive people are through the roof because there's so much negativity out there. And so we need this like right now more than ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm so glad you mentioned that part because it is so true. My partner Ike is extremely intuitive and we talk about that a lot, like how much, the energy of the world today, obviously based on what's going on, it's a no-brainer why it would be like that. But yeah, I think that's so helpful that you're creating something like that to help people, be able to transfer that. I think that's beautiful. So I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about your actually new intuition program as well as a free gift you have. So could you share a little bit about those? And there's a couple buttons below that link over to your site.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about this. My free is an audio. It's a half-hour audio teaching that I did about letting go. So how to let go, because I think there's so much mystery about this. There's a lot of gurus online are like, let go, you got to let go, you feel better. But no one really teaches you like the practical steps and how to do it. And so this teaching, you won't find it anywhere else. It came through for me to understand for myself how to let something go. And I've been teaching it for the last 5 years and it's changing people's lives. And so that's just a free sign up. It's jodiaman.com/letgo, but the button's right there. And so you get that, and you'll be on my mailing list, so you get my free blogs. I still blog and do videos on YouTube. And then coming up, I'm doing my next cohort of my intuition program. And so if you're interested in developing your intuition, you could come hang out with me And it's a live, there's online content, but there's a live program. We get together every week and we do the practices and do the healing and integration together as a group. So it's really, it's the third group through it. And it's a really special place.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for offering both of those, and obviously letting go, so important. And that's the free gift. And then your intuition program. So I highly recommend anyone interested in diving into that to go check those out. And here's one other question that I failed to ask you yet, and I'm just thinking of now as it relates to toxic relationships. Like for people who, let's say they have gotten out of one and they don't want to get into another one, right? And like create a perpetual pattern of toxic relationship. I guess in this stage talking about like romantic partnerships. So do you have suggestions on how people can not repeat that cycle, like work they can do on themselves in the interim before they dive back into a relationship?
Yeah, just really understanding what happened in the past relationship and not holding themselves 100% responsible. Understanding what you did to continue that, but we sometimes go overboard on that. Sometimes we give responsibility, especially in these kind of situations. And like, I stayed too long. Why would I let that happen to me? All these kind of self-blame things that just make things worse, don't make the healing better. And so that forgiveness and peace, actually, I do have a forgiveness masterclass as well, but the letting go will really help you learn how to forgive yourself from what happened in the past. And it's not like, oh, you have to be alone forever and figure out how to love yourself. I'm not all about that. It's like you forgive yourself pretty quickly once you really know how. You could let go pretty quickly. It's just that no one's taught us how to do it. And if you do that, if you forgive yourself, then it will really help you go on. But also have a mentor, have a counselor, have a mentor, have somebody. I still work with people. Have somebody to help you navigate that time so that the next time is wonderful. I work with people all the time that have had bad relationships in the past and have wonderful ones in the future. So don't for a minute think that you're doomed to always be in a toxic relationship because you've had one or two or even three in the past. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You could have a wonderful one in your next one. I promise you, it's absolutely possible and available, and you could probably inform that.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that. And I too, I've had that experience also. I had definitely a whole slew of really unhealthy ones in the past. And, 10 years ago, met my partner, Ike, and it's amazing. So it is so a possibility for everybody watching. Absolutely. Do you have any last insights? Anything else you want to share before we wrap up, Jodi?
Well, oh gosh, I just have so much to say, but no, I think we covered most of it. I think it's really important to understand that, people who are toxic, they create chaos. That's part of the thing. It's part of their manipulation is to create chaos and then be the person who say, I'm the one that's going to create order. And so you get dependent on them. So they're creating the chaos and nobody wants chaos. It feels very uncomfortable to be in chaos. We don't want chaos. And they're the only person because they isolated us from everybody else in our life. So the only person there, and they say, I'm the one that will calm everything. I'm the one that will have order. I'm the savior. And that's how they set you up for staying. We totally understand why you would stay in a relationship. You're not the only one. So many people do, but I promise there's a way out. You've not done anything that can't change the direction here. You've done nothing wrong that can't be changed.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for doing this, Jodi. It's been awesome. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you too.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone who's watching or listening right now for showing up for yourself today in this journey. And we'll see you again real soon. Take care. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this latest class with Jodi Aman. We talked about how and when to stand up to gaslighting. I really enjoyed this conversation. Gaslighting is a seemingly very common thing these days, and it's coming up in all sorts of different relationships for people. So I think it was really great to get a better understanding of what gaslighting is and where it comes from. I thought it was really interesting to talk about how when someone feels powerless, sometimes what they do is try to control something outside of them. So, just kind of take a look at your own life. So when you feel powerless, when you feel insecure, when you feel out of safety, How do you handle that? I definitely know that when I feel that way, I certainly also want to control things. Okay, what can I do to just control my environment so I feel better? So she also talked about, but when people who are gaslighting, they take that lack of power and then transfer it into controlling other people. Hence the trying to create confusion and frustration for you in questioning and second guessing yourself and that kind of stuff. So I thought that was a pretty fascinating conversation of why gaslighting shows up for people. And I also wanted to make a quick note of questioning your conditioning. She talked a lot about how, let's say when you were younger, you were conditioned to respond in certain ways. Maybe you had a narcissistic parent or a challenging childhood, which literally wired your brain, conditioned you to respond to people in certain ways. Maybe it conditioned you to be codependent. Maybe it conditioned you to be a people pleaser. Maybe your upbringing conditioned you to be perfectionistic. So all those kinds of things. So just taking a look at in your adult relationships, are you questioning your conditioning? When you react in certain ways, where is that coming from? And do you need to act that way? If you're someone who walks on eggshells around other people, is that conditioning that came from your past? Where is this coming from? Are you questioning your conditioning? And I just thought that was really important for us all to just take a look at how we operate, how our brains are wired in the relationships we're in. And I think awareness is the first step to anything. And if that then leads to getting out of a toxic relationship, then that's great. Just knowing that, you can actually be aware of why your brain operates in certain ways, I think is so helpful. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we'll see you again real soon. Take care.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What ALLEN and Ande Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.